The stars shone coldly as the representatives of the Galactic Council sat in their towering chambers, each facing a massive holographic display that flickered to life. In the heart of the room, a human ambassador, Marcus Vance, stood rigidly. His uniform was a simple but sharp cut, his eyes filled with determination as he watched the faces of the council members. He knew this moment could shape the future of his people. But it wasn't going to be the future he had hoped for. Humanity, a tall, narrow-eyed alien spoke, his voice laced with disdain, has failed to prove its readiness for membership within the Galactic Council. He was a representative of the Yuvan species, a race with elongated limbs and the ability to phase through solid objects. His name was Raider, and he made it clear that no matter how hard they tried, humanity would never be seen as equals. The holographic assembly room was a vast, marble-paved space where beings of different species, most of them far older than humanity, gathered. They represented billions of years of galactic history, far more than the mere centuries humanity had spent on the stars. And all of them had come to one conclusion. The verdict had been swift. Despite your technological strides, your methods are unrefined, another member, a blue-skinned and heavily muscled Phrygian, rumbled. His voice was low but carried the weight of an entire species behind it. Your economy is unstable, your social structures erratic, and your tendencies toward violence are not what we consider the foundation of a reliable partner. Marcus clenched his fist behind his back, his jaw set. Every word felt like a slap to his face. He knew what they thought of humanity. They were young, reckless, unpredictable. But the rejection still stung. "We understand the decision, Councillor Vielthray," Marcus said, speaking in measured tones, though his heart raced in his chest. He had hoped for better, but deep down, he had always known that this moment was coming. "But I must insist that humanity's contributions to the galactic community speak for themselves. We've offered solutions to several problems, from energy distribution to peacekeeping operations. We've fought alongside your fleets in the recent Draxan conflict, and yet—" "You've done enough, human," Raider interrupted, his cold eyes narrowing. "Your contributions have been admirable for a species of your age. But your methods lack the discipline and grace we require. We have made our decision." The words hung in the air, final and unyielding. Marcus's chest tightened, but he forced himself to remain composed. His eyes scanned the other council members, their expressions impassive, all of them agreeing without hesitation. The council had decided. Humanity was not worthy. The holographic chamber flickered as the transmission ended, and Marcus stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where the council had once been. The silence that followed was deafening. Back aboard the human flagship Endurance, a massive warship now anchored just outside the Galactic Council's primary station, Marcus returned to his quarters. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as he walked with a sense of grim determination. The weight of failure pressed down on him, but beneath it, something else stirred: anger, resolve. He entered his private space, an austere room adorned only with the necessities, a desk, a bed, a few personal items that connected him to the humanity he had left behind. But this moment wasn't about comfort. He moved to the communications panel and keyed in a secure transmission. "Captain Harlow," he said as the screen activated, showing a rugged-looking woman with short-cropped dark hair and the insignia of the United Earth Federation on her uniform. "Get me Admiral Martinez. It's time we take the next step." In the war room of the Endurance, Marcus met with the key leaders of the United Earth Federation. They sat at a large round table, staring at the map of the galaxy spread out before them. The Federation, humanity's most powerful military and political body, had been working in the shadows for months, preparing for this very moment. "What's the word, Marcus?" Admiral Martinez asked, her voice steady and sharp, yet with a hint of concern. She'd known this was coming, but the truth of it was hard to swallow. "We're on our own now," Marcus replied. "The Galactic Council won't accept us. But we've already prepared for this." The room fell silent. Every leader knew what that meant. Humanity had been preparing for the possibility of rejection from the Council for years. Their fleet had been expanded, their research into faster-than-light travel advanced beyond anything the Council had been aware of, and their alliances with disaffected species had already been formed. "You're saying we go ahead with the plan?" Martinez asked. "Exactly," Marcus said, his voice resolute. "Humanity's not waiting for permission anymore. We'll build our own alliance. One that doesn't depend on the whims of the Council. We'll show them what real unity and strength can do." Later, within the command center of the Endurance, preparations began. Across the galaxy, secretive communications were being sent. First to the Clore, a species that had been disillusioned by the Council's failure to uphold peace on their homeworld. Then to the Terraquians, an ancient race of energy beings whose once thriving empire had been shackled by the Council's red tape. One by one, humanity's newfound allies were called to action. Marcus stood at the center of the operations room, watching the screen as the alliance began to take shape. He looked out at the stars once again. This time, they didn't feel cold. They felt full of potential. Humanity's journey had just begun. "We'll show them," Marcus whispered, a fire igniting in his chest. "We'll show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." As the ships of the nascent Humanities Galactic Alliance slipped into the darkness of space, the galaxy stirred. The Galactic Council might have rejected them, but humanity was never one to accept defeat. The spark of rebellion had been lit, and no power in the galaxy could extinguish it. Humanity had been rejected by the Galactic Council, but that didn't mean they were powerless. Far from it. The Endurance wasn't the only ship in the new Humanities Galactic Alliance, HGA. Within hours of the Council's final decision, the first wave of humanity's new fleet had been dispatched, crossing the vast expanse of space at speeds that would have been unimaginable to the Council's oldest races. There was no turning back now. Marcus Vance stood at the center of the Endurance's command deck, his eyes scanning the holographic star maps that filled the room. A map of the galaxy, with hundreds of pins now blinking to life across it. Each pin marked a species, a planet, or a system that had pledged allegiance to the fledgling alliance. He turned to Captain Harlow, who was overseeing the operations, and nodded. "We're on track," she said, her voice calm but tinged with an edge of excitement. "Every communication is going out. The Clore have responded positively, the Terraquians are already mobilizing. Our secret allies are ready to act." Marcus nodded. The first few steps had been carefully planned. But now, humanity needed to take control and show the galaxy they were more than just an inconvenience. The hologram of the galaxy flickered as a new system appeared. It wasn't just one system, though. It was the coordinated response of multiple species and planets joining humanity's cause. "Start the message," Marcus ordered. Harlow activated the comms, sending a message across the galaxy, encrypted with layers of codes only their new allies could decrypt. It wasn't just a call to arms, it was a declaration. "We are the Humanities Galactic Alliance. We are here to offer you a choice: freedom, cooperation, and unity. We stand against the oppression of the Galactic Council, and we invite you to join us in the creation of a new order, where every voice is heard." A new era had begun. Aboard the Clore homeworld, the reaction. In the cold, rocky caverns of the Clore homeworld, the message reached its target. Znara, the High Matriarch of the Clore, stood before the massive crystal console, her long arms raised to touch the pulsing surface as the transmission played. She had seen the Galactic Council's failure firsthand. Her people had once been thriving under the Council's rule, but in recent decades, their voice had been ignored, their needs overlooked, and their systems left to decay. The Clore were an ancient species, known for their deep knowledge of energy manipulation, but their once glorious empire was now shackled by the Council's bureaucracy. Znara's claws clicked together, her alien face set in a stern expression. She could feel the weight of the decision. Humanity was young, untested, but their promise was real. Their message resonated with her people's deepest needs: autonomy, respect, and a chance to thrive again. She turned to her advisors, her voice low but firm. "We join them," she said. The advisors murmured in agreement. They were no longer a species that bent the knee to a failing system. The Clore would take their place alongside humanity, and together, they would be a force the galaxy had not seen in millennia. The Terraquian response. Farther out, in the shimmering void of the Terracian system, the beings of energy and light floated in a massive nexus of plasma. They had witnessed the Council's failure to protect the galaxy's fragile peace. The Terraquians had once been revered as the keepers of galactic knowledge, but under the Council's reign, their power had waned. When the transmission from humanity's new alliance reached them, it was not heard in the traditional sense but felt, an empathic wave that rippled through the energy being's very essence. The message was simple: they were being offered a chance to stand once more at the forefront of the galaxy, not as subordinates, but as equals. Calther, the High Advisor of the Terraquians, felt the pulse of humanity's vision, an unyielding promise of cooperation and freedom. He turned to the Council of Elders. "Humanity offers us a place of strength," he said. We have been forced into the shadows for too long. It is time to step forward, to unite with those who seek a new path. The Terraqueans would join the alliance, and with them, the potential of ancient knowledge and advanced energy manipulation would become a part of humanity's growing force. A new vision of governance. Back aboard the Endurance, Marcus and his senior staff met to discuss the next phase. Now that the Chlor and Terraqueans had pledged their support, the hard work was only beginning. They couldn't simply be another bureaucratic government like the Galactic Council. They had to offer something more, something that would unite the galaxy's disparate species. We need a new system of governance, Marcus said, his voice sharp with the weight of his responsibility. One that guarantees freedom, that respects the diversity of its members. Captain Harlow nodded. We've been talking about this for years. The Council doesn't work because it's too centralized. Too many species are being forced to conform to the whims of a few. And that's where we come in, Marcus said. Our alliance will be decentralized. Each species will have the power to govern themselves, but we'll all be united under one banner. We'll have regular councils, but the people, the planets, will have the final say. This could work, Harlow said thoughtfully. But it's going to take a lot of coordination. And we can't afford to make mistakes. The Council will be watching us closely. Marcus turned to a tactical officer, who had been listening intently. What about the Outer Rim systems? Any word from them? The officer hesitated before replying. Some of the more remote systems are hesitant. They've been dealing with the Council's bureaucratic controls for so long, they don't trust anyone, even us. It's up to us to show them that we're different, Marcus said. We'll prove that the HGA is about freedom and opportunity, not about control. The first victory. It wasn't long before humanity's new allies took action. A small strategically positioned planet on the edge of Council-controlled space, Krolath 4, was in the midst of a civil war, with factions vying for control. The Galactic Council had done little to intervene, as it was a minor issue in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Humanity and the Chlor, in cooperation with a few Terraquean diplomats, intervened. But unlike the Council's usual heavy-handed tactics, the Alliance brought in peacekeepers, humanitarian aid, and a powerful negotiation team. The war ended within weeks, the factions agreeing to peace under the newly established HGA framework. The message was clear to the galaxy. The HGA was capable of more than just rhetoric. It was a force for change, a beacon of hope for those tired of the old, oppressive order. A growing storm. The Galactic Council, sensing the power shift, began to respond in subtle ways. There were rumors of covert missions to destabilize key HGA allies, attempts to discredit their leadership, and attempts to sabotage their growing fleet. But it was all in vain. Humanity's new alliance was more than prepared. The HGA was no longer a fleeting idea or a dream. It was a movement that had begun to reshape the galaxy, one ally at a time. The Council could no longer ignore them, and every victory for the alliance only fueled the fire that would one day topple the ancient order. Humanity had been rejected, but now, it was humanity who was in control of its own destiny. The stars shimmered like the glint of a blade, cold and distant, as the Endurance moved deeper into uncharted space. Marcus Vance stood on the observation deck, his arms crossed behind him, watching the swirl of stars pass in silence. The enormity of what they were undertaking had begun to sink in. The Humanity's Galactic Alliance had already achieved more than anyone could have imagined, but now the real challenge was beginning. The holographic display in front of him showed the current status of the Alliance, expanding rapidly, attracting new allies, solidifying power. Yet even as humanity's influence grew, the shadow of the Galactic Council loomed, darkening every corner of space they touched. "You're still up here." Captain Harlow's voice broke the silence, and Marcus turned to face her. She stood at the entrance, her posture relaxed but with the weariness of someone who hadn't slept in days. Her eyes, usually sharp and alert, carried the signs of a long struggle. "Couldn't sleep," Marcus replied, his tone distant. "I keep thinking, are we moving fast enough? We've made allies, yes. We built the foundation. But the Council won't stay quiet forever." Harlow joined him at the window, her gaze following his. "No, they won't. But what we've done already. Marcus, this is bigger than we thought. We've drawn the line in the sand. The galaxy is already looking to us, to the Alliance, for a new way." Marcus frowned, considering her words. The vastness of space was humbling, but it was also full of opportunities. Humanity had come far, and the tide was beginning to shift in their favor. Yet, despite the victories, There was a nagging feeling at the back of his mind, the sense that the Galactic Council's response was inevitable and dangerous. The Council's counterstrike. The Galactic Council had spent the first few weeks after humanity's declaration in relative silence, but their passive approach was wearing thin. The rapid expansion of the HGA had made it clear the Council could no longer ignore the growing influence of the new alliance. They needed to act. In the Council's inner sanctum, a small, secretive gathering of the most influential members convened in a dark chamber. The massive stone walls of the room reflected the harsh, glowing light of a distant star, casting long shadows over the gathered faces. Raider, the Yuvan representative, stood at the head of the table, his transparent form flickering in the dim light as he addressed the others. "We underestimated humanity," he said, his voice cold and deliberate. "The rise of the HGA has been swift. They've already established diplomatic ties with the Clore and Terraquians, and our attempts to discredit them have failed at every turn. They're organizing, and they've got more than just military might. There's a growing sentiment among the fringe systems that the HGA's decentralized model is superior." His words stung the pride of the Council, but it was the truth. "We can no longer afford to treat this as a nuisance," Raider continued. "If humanity's alliance spreads unchecked, it will eventually outgrow us. We must move swiftly, decisively. We will destabilize their alliances. We will target their leaders, plant distrust among their allies." A member of the Phrygian delegation, a large creature with 4 arms and a razor-sharp mandible, leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "What of the HGA's military? We've heard reports, they're improving their fleets faster than we anticipated. Can we defeat them in open conflict?" Raider's eyes glowed with calculated intensity. "We'll avoid direct confrontation for now. We'll strike from the shadows, covert operations, misinformation campaigns, sabotaging their logistics. Humanity may be resourceful, but they are young and vulnerable. We'll exploit their inexperience." The Council members murmured in agreement. They would test the strength of the HGA through covert warfare, subtle, insidious actions designed to create chaos and disarray within the ranks of the growing alliance. The first signs of tension. Back in the HGA, Marcus received word of the first signs of the Council's subtle strikes. A small, peaceful system on the outskirts of Alliance space, Grail 9, had suddenly been caught in the midst of a political crisis. Messages had been intercepted, claiming that key officials had been bribed by the Council. Another member species, the Archeli, had pulled out of a diplomatic meeting citing unforeseen circumstances and strange rumors about the HGA's leadership. Marcus stared at the report, his mind racing. "This is just the beginning," Harlow said from behind him, sensing his frustration. "The Council will be testing us, pushing for a weakness. But we've seen this before. They always rely on deception and fear." Marcus clenched his fists. "And we'll show them that humanity is not afraid. We'll turn this around. We can't let our allies start questioning our unity." A visit to the Clore. To stabilize the situation, Marcus and a small group of his most trusted commanders decided to visit the Clore homeworld personally, hoping to shore up their support and ensure they stayed committed to the alliance. Znara, the Clore matriarch, had been one of the first to sign on with the HGA, and her species' energy manipulation capabilities made them a critical part of the growing force. The Clore's crystalline cities stretched high into the atmosphere, shimmering under the light of a nearby star. Their world was a beautiful, foreboding place, where natural energy fields radiated from the surface like auroras. The people themselves were ethereal, with long, translucent limbs and faces as sharp as the edges of their crystal structures. Znara greeted Marcus and his team in a grand hall, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "We have felt the tremors, human. The Council makes its move in the shadows. Their reach is long." "I know," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "But we've come to ensure that your people are with us. The Archeli pulled out, and Grail 9 is on the brink of chaos. We need to show them we won't be divided." Znara studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Your cause is just. But remember, the Clore have been betrayed before. Trust cannot be given lightly." "I don't expect it to be," Marcus said. "But together, we're stronger than they realize. We'll root out these lies. We'll stand firm." For a long while, they discussed the logistics of reinforcing their alliances, tightening their internal communication, and improving their intelligence networks. As the conversation unfolded, Marcus realized that the alliance wasn't just about military might or diplomacy, it was about trust, unity, and the strength to resist the forces that sought to tear them apart. The tipping point. As the Endurance left the Clore homeworld, the first full-scale operation against the Council's covert forces began to take shape. With the Terraquians' help, humanity was able to expose the Council's sabotage attempts and launch a series of countermeasures that neutralized several key threats. Yet, despite these victories, the tension within the Alliance was palpable. The Council's strikes were testing their resolve, pushing them to the limit. If they were to survive, they would need to act quickly and decisively. The galaxy was no longer a place of stable order. The Galactic Council's reign was beginning to crumble, but the battle was far from over. Humanity had made its stand, but the true test would come when the Council would no longer be content with subtlety. They would strike hard, and when they did, humanity and its allies would have to be ready. Marcus sat at the command table on the Endurance, staring at the map of the galaxy, now dotted with more Alliance-controlled systems. A new message blinked on his screen: the Council prepares for war. It was only a matter of time. Humanity's fight for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. The Endurance cut through the darkness of space like a razor, its engines humming with the power of a fleet that had been rapidly growing for months. Marcus Vance sat in his private quarters, staring out the small window at the stars. His mind, usually sharp and focused, had been clouded with uncertainty. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity. They had tried to break the HGA with subtle sabotage, misinformation, and threats. But now the gloves were off, and Marcus knew that the Council would soon make their move, and it would be decisive. There would be no more covert strikes. No more backroom politics. This would be an open war, and humanity's resolve would be tested like never before. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. His door slid open, and Captain Harlow stepped in, her expression grim. "We have a situation," she said. "You need to see this." Marcus followed her into the command center. The room was dimly lit, screens flickering with the latest intelligence feeds. Harlow tapped a few keys, bringing up a message intercepted from Council-controlled space. The transmission was encrypted, but the message was clear enough. It was from Raider, the Yuvan representative, speaking directly to the other members of the Council. "The time has come to eliminate the threat posed by the Humanities Galactic Alliance. We will strike decisively. No more subterfuge. The full might of the Council's fleet will be mobilized. It's time to bring the galaxy back into the fold." Marcus clenched his fists. So it begins. The Council's fleet mobilizes. The Council was gathering its forces. Hidden across the galaxy, massive fleets began to assemble, silent, deadly warships of every size and shape, ships that had once been the pride of the most ancient species in the galaxy. They were sleek, imposing, and equipped with weapons of unimaginable power. And now they were being pulled into a unified force with one mission: to crush the HGA. The message to humanity was clear: submit or face destruction. As the Council fleets activated their FTL drives, Marcus called an emergency meeting of the HGA's senior command staff aboard the Endurance. The atmosphere in the briefing room was tense, the air heavy with the weight of impending conflict. Harlow stood by the large holographic map at the center of the room, projecting a detailed chart of the galaxy. Red markers blinked over the Council's key strategic systems, now surrounded by thousands of mobilizing ships. "We have only a limited amount of time to prepare," Harlow said, turning to face the room. "Their fleets will be here in less than 2 weeks. We have to act fast if we're going to be ready." "We can't match their fleet size directly," said General Riker, the HGA's military commander. "But we don't need to. Our strength is in our speed, our adaptability, and our alliances. If we hit them hard, strike when they least expect it, we can keep them off balance long enough to weaken their resolve." Marcus nodded. "We'll do what humanity does best: use our brains. The Council has been entrenched in its ways for millennia. We've got the edge in flexibility. We also have the Clore, the Terraquians, and several other races with us now," Harlow added. "We've already managed to establish strongholds in key sectors, and our intelligence teams have been hard at work tracking Council movement." Marcus looked around the room. Everyone was ready. The first steps of their strategy had been laid out, but the scale of the coming war was daunting. "We'll strike fast and hard," he said, his voice firm. "We take the fight to them before they can reach our borders. We'll create a diversion, spread them thin, and force them into a fight on our terms. A surprise offensive." The Council's fleets were vast, but they were still relying on their old strategies, their immense power, and their belief in overwhelming force. What they didn't anticipate was humanity's ability to wage war in a completely different way. Under General Riker's guidance, the HGA fleet had begun using a new tactic, the Blitzkrieg. Using advanced technology and the deep knowledge of their allies, humanity struck quickly, utilizing smaller, faster ships to intercept Council supply lines, disrupt their communications, and pick off their weaker fleets one by one. The first major battle occurred in the Zeta-9 system. The Council's flagship fleet, a massive conglomeration of ships of various species, had been advancing toward HGA space. It was expected to be a sure victory for the Council, given their overwhelming numbers. But as they entered the system, they found themselves trapped by a calculated ambush. Humanity had placed hidden mines in the path of the Council ships, disabling their long-range sensors. Then, using advanced cloaking technology developed by the Terraquians, the HGA fleet had surrounded them, launching a series of surprise attacks on the isolated enemy ships. The Council was forced to retreat, its pride bruised, but the damage had been done. Humanity had shown that they were capable of not only matching but surpassing the Council's expectations in battle. "We've won a significant victory," General Riker reported after the battle. "But they'll be back. And next time, they'll come with everything they've got." Marcus nodded. "We've proven a point. But this is just the beginning." Raising tensions. Back at Council headquarters, Raider was furious. The loss in the Zeta-9 system had shaken the confidence of the Council's leadership, and whispers of dissent had begun to rise among the Council's representatives. Their superiority had been questioned, and the galaxy was beginning to take notice of humanity's rising power. "We underestimated them," Raider growled, his form flickering in frustration. "Humanity is not the primitive species we thought them to be. They are smarter, faster, and more capable than we realized." "The question now is how to respond," said the Phreagian delegate, his mandibles clicking nervously. "We cannot allow this rebellion to continue. If we do not act decisively, we risk losing control of the entire galaxy." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. The Council had a long history of ruling with an iron fist, and their fear of losing that power was palpable. "We will retaliate," Raider said, his voice low but resolute. "We'll bring the full force of our fleets to bear on their weak points. We will crush them, and then we will show the galaxy that no one, no matter how many allies they have, can stand against the Council." The HGA's response. As the Council prepared its next move, the HGA wasn't standing idle. In addition to bolstering their military forces, Marcus had ordered the development of new diplomatic initiatives. He had learned something critical in the Zeta-9 battle. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just military might, it was the ability to unite disparate species under a common cause. The HGA's diplomats were already reaching out to systems on the edge of Council space. They were offering more than just military support, they were offering autonomy, the chance to govern themselves without interference, and the promise of a galaxy where every species had a seat at the table. "The Council may have military strength, but we have something they can't match," Marcus told Harlow as they reviewed the latest diplomatic communications. "We have a vision of a galaxy where every species is free to thrive." "We've already attracted some new allies," Harlow said, her eyes scanning the list of systems that had pledged to join the HGA. "It's working, Marcus. People are starting to believe in what we're building." A shadow looms. As the HGA continued to grow, the final showdown with the Council loomed closer. The fleets of both sides were gathering, their movements carefully calculated, waiting for the right moment to strike. The next few days would determine the fate of the galaxy. The tension was unbearable. For the first time since the birth of the HGA, Marcus felt a deep sense of uncertainty. Could humanity and its allies truly defeat the might of the Council? Or would the galaxy fall back into the hands of the ancient powers that had ruled it for so long? But there was no turning back. The war had already begun. And humanity, for all its youth and inexperience, was ready to fight for its future. The stars outside the Endurance seemed to pulse with an ominous glow as the galaxy prepared for war. And Marcus knew, deep down, that this battle, this fight for freedom, was just the beginning. The silence in the command center of the Endurance was broken only by the soft hum of consoles and the occasional click of a keyboard. Marcus Vance stood before the holographic display, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the various fleet movements across the galaxy. The time for diplomacy was over, war was on the horizon. "Ready, sir." General Riker's voice broke through the quiet as he stepped up beside Marcus, his tone brisk but calm. "The fleets are in position. We've scattered the Council's forces, but they're regrouping. They'll be here in less than 48 hours. Marcus nodded, his gaze still fixed on the map. "I know. They've mobilized faster than we anticipated. The Zeta-9 victory won't be enough to deter them. We need to hit them hard, force them to react instead of plan. We've got a tactical advantage, Riker replied. The Council's arrogance is their greatest flaw. They think they can overwhelm us with sheer force, but they're not ready for the kind of guerrilla tactics we've been using. Their fleets are slow to adapt. Marcus turned to face him. It's not just about their fleets. It's about the systems they control. Every victory we take weakens their hold. We have to destabilize them from within. We need to create fractures. Agreed, Harlow added, stepping forward with her tablet in hand. We've already had success undermining their supply chains. Our covert operations are disrupting their fuel routes, and we're seeing cracks in their alliances with some of the lesser species. Marcus felt a surge of determination. The Galactic Council might have been an ancient and powerful force, but humanity was no stranger to adversity. They had survived far worse. And now, they had the galaxy on the edge of change. This war, for all its brutality, was a test that humanity would pass. We move out in 2 hours, Marcus said, his voice steady. Prepare the fleets. We're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting for a new future. The first major assault. The first major engagement between the HGA and the Galactic Council took place in the Ryle system. It was a strategically important hub for the Council, a nexus of trade routes and military presence. If humanity could take this system, it would send a clear message. They could strike at the heart of the Council's power, and they were not afraid. As the Endurance and the rest of the HGA fleet jumped into the Ryle system, the scale of the battle became immediately apparent. The Council had already begun deploying their forces, sleek, massive warships that dwarfed anything humanity had at their disposal. But what the Council didn't count on was the sheer unpredictability of humanity's tactics. All ships engage at will, Marcus commanded over the comms. The HGA fleet split into smaller, faster groups, skirting the edges of the Council fleet's formation. The first wave of attacks was swift and brutal. Humanity's ships moved with unmatched agility, darting between asteroids, using the system's gravitational fields to make unpredictable moves that the Council fleet struggled to counter. The faster ships targeted Council supply vessels, disabling their weapons and disrupting their communications before retreating into nearby nebulae for cover. It's working, Riker's voice crackled over the comms. The Council's fleet is in disarray. They don't know how to respond. But the Council wasn't going down easily. They retaliated with overwhelming firepower, their massive ships launching devastating barrages at the smaller, more agile HGA vessels. The space around Ryle turned into a deadly ballet of precision strikes and evasive maneuvers. Explosions lit up the dark void, and the once pristine system became a war zone. Marcus watched the battle unfold from the command center. Stay focused. We need to draw them in. Take out their capital ship first. If we cripple their command structure, the rest will fall apart. The Endurance led the charge, targeting the largest of the Council warships, a dreadnought with shields strong enough to withstand even the fiercest fire. The HGA fleet's coordinated strikes concentrated on its vulnerable spots, missile silos, supply lines, and shield generators. Slowly, but surely, the massive ship began to break down under the relentless assault. Shields are down. We've breached their hull, Riker announced with a sharp breath of relief. All ships, concentrate fire. The Council's flagship, Akari's Prime, began to falter. Its once imposing presence in the field became a beacon of weakness. With a final barrage from the HGA fleet, the flagship erupted in a massive fireball, its debris scattered across the battlefield. The tides of the battle shifted dramatically. The remaining Council ships attempted to regroup, but their morale was shattered. With their command structure in disarray, many vessels began to retreat, abandoning the field to the relentless assault of humanity's forces. The fallout. As the battle came to a close and the remaining Council ships fled, Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The victory was hard-won, but it was a crucial one. The HGA had not only taken the Ryle system but had also delivered a decisive blow to the Council's sense of invincibility. Yet, even in the midst of their success, Marcus knew that the war was far from over. The Council wouldn't simply surrender. Their retaliation would come, and when it did, it would be swift and brutal. As he stood on the bridge, surveying the aftermath of the battle, Harlow approached with a new report in hand. Raider has called for a council-wide summit, she said, her voice grim. They're mobilizing additional fleets. They're not giving up. Marcus sighed, feeling the weight of the war pressing down on him. We'll be ready for them. But we can't just wait for their next move. We need to keep the momentum going, strike at their weak points, expose their vulnerabilities, and hit them where it hurts. Harlow nodded. We'll have to move fast. The Council isn't just a military threat, they control a huge part of the galaxy's trade routes and communication systems. If we can target their economic infrastructure, we can weaken their power base. A new threat. But as Marcus prepared to make his next move, a new danger emerged on the horizon. A transmission from an unknown source arrived at the Endurance. The message was short, direct, and chilling. We are coming for you. The Council's allies are rallying. You cannot escape what's coming. The signal was untraceable, and the tone was one of unyielding certainty. Humanity had made its stand, but now, they were facing something far darker than the Council alone. The message was a warning, but it was also a challenge. It wasn't just the Galactic Council they had to worry about anymore. There were other, more dangerous forces out there, forces that had remained in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Marcus clenched his fists, his jaw set in determination. No matter what comes next, we will not back down. Humanity fights for its future, and we will never give up. The storm that was brewing in the galaxy was only getting worse. But humanity had already proven that it could weather the fiercest of battles. Now, they would have to face the galaxy's full fury. And they would do it together. The battle for the future of the galaxy was far from over. But Marcus knew one thing for sure: humanity had finally found its place among the stars, and no force in the universe would take it away. The war had been long, grueling, and devastating. But the end was now on the horizon, and with it, a new chapter in the galaxy's history. The once dominant Galactic Council had been fractured beyond repair, its fleets in disarray, its alliances crumbling under the weight of humanity's relentless offensive. The HGA, with its rapidly expanding coalition of species, had already turned the tide in several key systems, and now they stood on the precipice of victory. Marcus Vance stood before the holographic display on the bridge of the Endurance, his eyes scanning the map of the galaxy. The final Council fleet was positioned in the Alder system, the last stronghold of their power. Once it was defeated, the war would officially be over, and the galaxy would be free. But even as victory loomed, there was a growing tension in the air. The unknown message they had intercepted, warning them that the Council's allies were coming, had proven more than just a threat. A new enemy had emerged from the shadows, one that the HGA had not expected. It was not the Galactic Council alone that humanity had to fear. The arrival of the warlords. The fleet that Marcus had anticipated was not the Council's, but that of a race known as the Orvith, an ancient and powerful species that had remained on the fringes of galactic affairs. They were warlords, merciless in their conquests, and they had long harbored resentment toward the rising power of the HGA. The Orvith fleet arrived in the Alder system with terrifying precision, their warships massive and heavily fortified, their weapons unlike anything the Council had ever employed. They were swift, calculating, and prepared to annihilate anything that stood in their way. The Orvith had allied with the remnants of the Galactic Council's military and were prepared to crush the HGA once and for all. This new threat had caught the Alliance off guard, and their forces were now divided, unsure of how to respond. But Marcus knew one thing: humanity had faced worse odds and had risen every time. This would not be the end. The final battle. The skies over Alder were filled with warships. The Endurance and its fleet stood against the combined might of the Council's remaining forces and the Orvith warlords. For the first time in the war, Marcus felt a deep uncertainty. The battle would not be easy. It would not be quick. But they had no choice. "We're outnumbered," General Riker said from across the command center, his voice steady despite the odds. "The Orvith warlords are known for their brutal efficiency. We'll have to use every tactic we have at our disposal if we're going to survive this." "We will survive," Marcus replied firmly. "Humanity has never backed down, and we're not starting now. We'll outthink them, outmaneuver them. We've done it before, and we'll do it again." The battle began in earnest as the first salvo of weapons fire illuminated the dark expanse of space. The HGA fleet was outnumbered, but they were faster and more agile. Their strategy was simple: divide the enemy, strike quickly, and then vanish before the enemy could respond. The Orvith warlords, however, had no intention of giving ground. They launched a ferocious assault, their ships firing devastating beams of energy that tore through the HGA's defenses. The Endurance shook under the impact, but Marcus remained focused, his mind working quickly to coordinate their next move. "Bring us around to their flank," Marcus commanded. "We need to hit their vulnerable ships before they can regroup." As the Endurance swung into position, the HGA fleet concentrated its fire on the Orvith's support ships, targeting their weaker points. The battle raged, ships falling one by one on both sides. But the Orvith warlords underestimated humanity's ability to adapt under pressure. "Their forces are in disarray," Harlow reported, her voice rising with excitement. "They're retreating. They didn't expect this kind of fight." Marcus watched the Orvith fleet falter as their command structure began to collapse. With their formation broken, the HGA took full advantage, sweeping in with renewed aggression. Ships that had once been the pride of the warlords now burned in space as their crews scrambled in desperation. The final blow came when the Endurance launched a coordinated strike at the Orvith flagship, the Vral, a colossal warship that had once been feared across the galaxy. With the combined firepower of the HGA fleet, the flagship was brought to its knees, its engines disabled and its shields crippled. The Orvith warlords, realizing that their last hope had been shattered, turned tail and fled, their fleet in ruins. The aftermath. The battle had been won, but the cost had been high. The Endurance had taken heavy damage, and several ships in the HGA fleet had been lost. But humanity had proven its resolve once again. The galaxy had seen what they were capable of. The remaining members of the Galactic Council were in full retreat, their power and influence shattered. The Orvith warlords, humbled and defeated, retreated back to the edges of the galaxy, their dream of dominating the stars broken. The HGA, with its growing coalition of species, now stood as the new beacon of hope for the galaxy. A new beginning. Months passed, and the galaxy began to heal. The HGA, under the leadership of Marcus Vance, established a new order, one built on cooperation, freedom, and mutual respect. The old bureaucratic systems of the Galactic Council were gone, replaced by a new, decentralized government that gave every species and every planet a voice. Humanity's vision had won. The galaxy would never be the same. "We did it," Harlow said, standing beside Marcus on the bridge of the Endurance. The stars outside the viewports twinkled softly, a symbol of the peace that was now possible. Marcus turned to her, his expression unreadable. "No, we did it. All of us." He watched as the ships of the HGA, along with their allies, moved through the stars. Ships of all shapes and sizes, their crews working together for the first time in history. Humanity had led the charge, but it had been a united effort. And now, they would shape the future of the galaxy together. The war was over. The Council had fallen. And in its place, a new era had begun. Marcus stood in the command center, looking out at the galaxy beyond. The stars were brighter now, not just because of the light they emitted, but because of the hope that filled the hearts of every species that had joined the HGA. Humanity had faced the greatest challenge the galaxy had ever seen, and it had emerged victorious. The future was theirs to shape. And Marcus knew, with certainty, that humanity would rise to the challenge. They would never be subjugated again. They had proven that the galaxy had a new power to reckon with. And this time, it was humanity that would lead.